Why am I being searched?
Turn around.
I didn't...
Turn around! Stop moving. Hands behind your back.
The Axon body camera footage showed Officer Neil Crawford walking up to a black Mercedes sedan at 10:38 p.m. on a Tuesday night. What the camera would record in the next 4 minutes would end his career, spark a federal investigation, and expose a truth that many people already knew.
Turn around.
I didn't...
Turn around!
So real. So real.
Stop moving.
You have to take it off.
Hands behind your back.
The Axon body camera footage showed Officer Neil Crawford walking up to a black Mercedes sedan at 10:38 p.m. on a Tuesday night. What the camera would record in the next 4 minutes would end his career, spark a federal investigation, and expose a truth that many people already knew but could now see with their own eyes. The man in that Mercedes was Edmund Williams, the 48-year-old police chief of the entire department. Officer Crawford had no idea who he was pulling over. And what Crawford did next, captured in high-definition video, would become one of the most watched police body camera videos in the country. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. This story needs to be heard, and your support helps us keep bringing these true stories to light. Edmund Williams had been a police officer for 26 years. He had worked his way up from patrol officer to detective to sergeant to captain, and finally to chief. He had been the chief for 4 years. He was respected, tough but fair, and had a reputation for holding officers accountable when they stepped out of line. That night, he was driving home from a community meeting at the rec center on the south side of town. He was wearing jeans and a plain black hoodie, no uniform, no badge visible, just a man driving home in his personal vehicle. Officer Neil Crawford was 29 years old and had been on the force for 3 years. He worked the night shift and had a reputation among other officers for being aggressive. He had 2 complaints on his record for excessive force, but both had been cleared after internal investigation. He saw the black Mercedes change lanes without signaling and decided to pull it over. Edmund saw the lights behind him and pulled over immediately. He was not worried. He knew the routine better than almost anyone. He turned off his engine, rolled down his window, and placed both hands on the steering wheel. He did not reach for his wallet. He did not move. He waited for the officer to approach. Crawford's body camera showed him walking up to the driver's side window. Edmund turned his head slightly to look at the officer. Crawford asked for slowly. Edmund reached back carefully and pulled out his wallet. He handed over his license. Then he leaned toward the glove box and pulled out the registration. He handed both documents to Crawford. The entire exchange was calm and polite. Crawford walked back to his patrol car. He ran the license through the system. This is where things should have clicked. Edmund Williams. The name should have meant something. But Crawford was not paying attention. The computer showed the address, the clean record, the information. But it did not flash a warning saying, "This is your boss." Crawford just saw a regular license for a regular person. He walked back to the Mercedes. He told Edmund that he had failed to signal when changing lanes. Edmund nodded and said he must not have noticed. Crawford then asked Edmund where he was coming from. Edmund said he was coming from a community meeting. Crawford asked what kind of meeting. Edmund said it was about neighborhood safety programs. This is where Crawford made his decision. He said the answer sounded vague. He asked Edmund to step out of the vehicle. Edmund asked why. It was a reasonable question. A failure to signal does not require someone to exit their vehicle. But Crawford repeated the command more firmly. Edmund complied. He opened his door and stepped out. He was 6 feet tall and solidly built. Crawford was shorter, maybe 5'9". The body camera showed Edmund standing beside his car, hands visible at his sides. Crawford told him to turn around and place his hands on the vehicle. Edmund asked again what this was about. Crawford did not answer the question. He grabbed Edmund's arm and spun him around to face the car. Edmund did not resist, but he did not move fast enough for Crawford's liking. Crawford told him to stop tensing up. Edmund said he was not tensing up. His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. He said he had done nothing wrong and did not understand why he was being searched. Crawford took this as resistance. He grabbed both of Edmund's arms and tried to pull them behind his back. Edmund instinctively pulled back slightly, not to fight, but because the movement was sudden and rough. Crawford immediately escalated. He swept Edmund's legs out from under him. The sound of Edmund hitting the pavement was sickening. It was a wet, heavy thud. His right shoulder took most of the impact. Then his head snapped to the side and hit the ground. The body camera showed Edmund lying face down on the asphalt, not moving for several seconds. Crawford pressed his knee into Edmund's back and wrenched both arms behind him. He slapped handcuffs on Edmund's wrists. Edmund's face was turned to the side. Blood was running from his nose and from a cut above his eye. His breathing was heavy. Crawford was breathing hard too, adrenaline pumping. He called into his radio that he had a suspect in custody who had resisted. Another lie. The video showed something different. Crawford pulled Edmund to his feet. Edmund was unsteady. His legs wobbled. The front of his hoodie was torn and dirty. Blood was dripping from his face onto his chest. Crawford walked him to the patrol car and put him in the back seat. The whole time, Edmund said nothing. He was dazed from hitting his head. Do you think his injuries were? She told him that was ridiculous. He was the police chief, and he had been assaulted by one of his own officers. That was serious no matter what. Edmund did not argue. He was tired and in pain. He just wanted to go home. But he knew that when he woke up in the morning, this would be far from over. This was going to be big. The body camera footage would have to be released. There would be investigations. There would be media attention. There would be questions about why an officer like Crawford, with 2 previous complaints, was still on the street. What do you think should happen to Officer Crawford? Keep reading. The body camera footage was released to the public 5 days later. Edmund himself made the decision to release it. Some people advised him not to, saying it would make him look weak or victimized. Edmund disagreed. He said transparency was not weakness. He said if this had happened to an ordinary citizen, the video would be released. The same standard should apply to him. The video went viral within hours. Millions of people watched Officer Crawford slam Police Chief Edmund Williams face first into the pavement for asking why he was being searched. The reactions were immediate and intense. Some people focused on the fact that Crawford had not recognized his own chief. Others focused on the larger issue of what this said about how officers treated people during traffic stops when they thought no one important was watching. Civil rights organizations immediately seized on the case. They pointed out that Edmund was a police chief, someone with power and authority, and he had still been treated this way during a routine traffic stop. What did that say about how ordinary black citizens were treated? If a police chief could be slammed to the ground for a turn signal violation, what chance did everyone else have? The police union released a statement saying Crawford deserved due process and a fair investigation. They said the union would ensure his rights were protected. That statement lasted exactly 2 days before the union walked it back after their members saw the body camera footage. Even the union could not defend what the video clearly showed. Edmund held a press conference 1 week after the incident. The cut above his eye was still visible, covered with a small bandage. He stood at a podium in City Hall with the mayor beside him. He spoke for 12 minutes. He said what happened to him was wrong. He said it was a clear example of excessive force. He said Officer Crawford would face appropriate consequences. But then he said something that surprised people. He said this was not just about one bad officer. He said this was about training, accountability, and the culture within policing that allowed officers like Crawford to keep their jobs despite multiple complaints. He said he took responsibility as chief for not addressing these issues more aggressively before. He said changes were coming. The district attorney announced charges against Crawford 2 weeks after the incident: assault, battery, filing a false report, violation of civil rights under color of law. Crawford was arrested at his home. He posted bail and was released. His trial was set for 4 months later. Internal Affairs completed their investigation in 3 weeks. They found that Crawford had violated department failure to call for medical assistance immediately. The recommendation was termination. Crawford was fired 30 days after the traffic stop. He appealed the decision through the union. The appeal was denied. He was no longer a police officer. His law enforcement certification was suspended pending the outcome of his criminal trial. Edmund returned to work 2 weeks after the incident. His shoulder still hurt, and he still had headaches from the concussion. But he said he needed to be present to implement the changes he had promised. He started by reviewing every officer's complaint history. Anyone with more than one excessive force complaint was flagged for additional review. He discovered something disturbing. Crawford had 2 official complaints on his record, but there were also 4 other incidents where citizens had tried to file complaints but had been discouraged by desk officers or given complicated paperwork that they never completed. Those incidents had never made it into Crawford's official file. Edmund changed the complaint process immediately. All complaints would now be accepted in person, by phone, by email, or through an online form. No citizen would be turned away or discouraged. Every complaint would be logged and investigated, even if it seemed minor. The days of complaints disappearing before they became official were over. He also implemented mandatory de-escalation training for every officer in the department, not just a one-time class, but ongoing quarterly training. Officers would be evaluated on their ability to de-escalate situations. It would become part of their performance reviews. Do these changes seem like enough? Let us know what you think. The trial began 4 months after the traffic stop. The prosecution's case was simple and devastating. They played the body camera footage on the first day. The jury watched Officer Crawford slam Chief Edmund Williams to the ground. They heard the impact. They saw the blood. They heard Crawford lie on his radio about Edmund resisting. The defense tried to argue that Crawford had feared for his safety. The prosecutor asked why he had feared for his safety during a turn signal violation. The defense said Edmund had pulled back when Crawford tried to handcuff him. The prosecutor played the video again in slow motion. It showed Edmund stop calmly and factually. He said he had complied with every instruction. He said he had asked legitimate questions about why he was being searched. He said Crawford had used force without warning or justification. The defense tried to suggest that Edmund should have identified himself as police chief. Edmund pointed out that he should not need a title to be treated with basic human dignity during a traffic stop. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. They found Crawford guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. At sentencing, the judge spoke directly to Crawford. He said that police officers are given significant power and authority. When they abuse that power, they betray the public trust. He said what Crawford had done was particularly egregious because he had done it to a man who had complied with every instruction. The fact that the man happened to be the police chief was almost beside the point. The point was that Crawford had used violence when it was not necessary and had lied about it afterward. Crawford was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He would serve at least 18 months before being eligible for parole. He would never work in law enforcement again. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. Edmund continued his reforms at the department. In the first year after the incident, complaints against officers actually increased by 40%. But this was not because officers were behaving worse. It was because citizens finally believed their complaints would be heard. Edmund saw this as progress. He also started a program where command staff, including himself, would occasionally ride along on patrol shifts. Not to supervise, but to observe and understand what officers were facing on the street. He wanted to stay connected to the reality of police work. The incident changed Edmund in ways that were hard to measure. He had been a police officer for 26 years. He had faced danger. He had been in difficult situations. But he had never been on the receiving end of police violence until that night. It gave him a perspective he had not fully understood before. He thought about all the people who had been treated the way Crawford treated him. People who had no power, no title, no ability to fight back. People who had been slammed to the ground and arrested and had no bust on parole. He gave no interviews. He made no public statements. He moved to a different state and found work in construction. His life as a police officer was over. Edmund served as police chief for 3 more years after the incident. He implemented every reform he had promised. Complaint investigations increased. Use of force incidents decreased. Community relations slowly improved. It was not perfect, but it was better. He retired at age 51, earlier than he had originally planned. He said he had done what he set out to do. The department was in better shape than when he started. It was time for someone else to take it forward. At his retirement ceremony, he was asked what case from his career had impacted him the most. He described the night he was assaulted during a traffic stop by one of his own officers. He said it had taught him that titles and power meant nothing when someone decided to abuse their authority. The body camera footage from that night is still used in police academies across the country. It is shown as an example of excessive force and improper escalation. Instructors freeze the video at key moments and ask trainee officers what Crawford should have done differently. The answers are always the same.
Wow.
He should not have ordered Edmund out of the car for a minor violation. He should have answered Edmund's questions. He should have de-escalated instead of using force. He should have recognized that compliance does not mean silence. Edmund Williams is now 52 years old.
Quite sad.
The scar above his eye is still visible if you look closely. His shoulder still bothers him sometimes when it rains. But he is alive and healthy and able to tell his story. He knows that many people who have gone through similar experiences are not as fortunate. He speaks occasionally at community events and police reform conferences. He tells the story of that traffic stop. He shows the body camera footage. And he asks a simple question. If this could happen to a police chief, what is happening to ordinary citizens every single day? The question hangs in the air because everyone already knows the answer. They have always known. But now they have video proof. Now they have the body camera footage of a police officer slamming his own chief face first into the pavement over a turn signal. And that footage, more than any speech or study or statistic, tells the whole truth about what happens when power meets accountability, or in most cases, when power meets the complete absence of it. Thank you for watching this story all the way through.